an amazing guest here tonight, and I'm glad he's here. His name is Ethan Bearman. He's a national syndicated radio talk show host, and the Ethan Bearman Show. Like when they tune in, what do we get?
You're going to get everything and anything. So on the Sunday syndicated show, I will cover any topic, whether it's state, national, international, intergalactic, interdimensional.
It's ambitious.
Anything that interests me, really. I love having that kind of control over my show as well at this point, is to be able to talk about whatever is interesting me. So I, for example, talked about the Red October cyber attack that was espionage that sounded like it was a Hollywood thriller. But nobody had heard about it. It was big international news, terrible, terrible hacking incident. We don't know who did it. I get to talk about that. Or I can talk about women's rights on an international scale. I can talk about the State of the Union address. I'm sure I will be covering that as well.
That's right. You're pretty opinionated, I would say. Wouldn't you say?
Very much.
That's very diplomatic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever heard me share my opinion before?
Well,
I try to be open-minded to facts and information, but you have to present it in a way that's going to sway my opinion. So if you're just going to come at me with an opinion and try and sway my opinion, that's not going to work.
No, seriously. I mean, so like what prompted you to create the show? And because it's so compelling to me, and I'm not like uber political. I wouldn't say the show is like always political. You cover so many different topics, but I'm really fascinated by the kind of work you're creating. It's kind of neat.
Well, I mean, what really brought me to doing this was listening. I love talk radio, and I love talking to people. I mean, this is just how I live, is wanting to have conversations and getting people's opinions and debating and arguing and getting to the bottom of something, and also figuring out where we have common ground so we can work together and find solutions to problems. And I wasn't hearing that on talk radio or talk television very much. I mean, there's some NPR, some CBS or PBS where you'll hear that, but it was very rare to hear on radio, and I thought this was a medium that I want to make a difference with.
Nice. All right, well, so I have a few topics here that you've covered recently, and so I'm just going to throw a few out there, and you just pretend like it's a roulette wheel and we're in Vegas, and the ball is going to land on something, and it's going to be the something that you want to talk about.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going to shoot out three. You recently...
No. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
You recently brought up that pennies should not exist, or the penny should not exist.
penny.
The penny.
Yes.
You also brought up the Santa Cruz Regional Transportation Commission. They have an extra $5 million.
in pennies?
In pennies.
Hopefully not in pennies. That would weigh
That would be
far
really
too
bad.
much.
That's why they need the buses to carry them around,
That's right.
probably.
Exactly.
I'm
But
sorry.
you were proposing the idea of, do they care what the public thinks about that?
Right.
Okay. I kind of dig this topic because I think it kind of would really stir people up here. Why buying local is not always a good idea?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Okay. And then something about Big Brother watching, and so is your employer. So it's one of those topics. Which one?
Well, let's start with the buying local. So we live in a community. It's not always good. So we live in a community where that's the mantra. I mean, it's everywhere. And the station, KSCO, think local first. And I appreciate that. I want to keep money in my community. But just simply buying local for the sake of buying local, if the shop doesn't give me good service, if the prices are far too high, if the quality of the product I'm trying to buy is not...
And so is your employer. This sounds interesting
Oh, yes.
to me. Yeah.
Well, we all hear about the government and the CIA and the NSA, and after 9/11, you heard about AT&T patching in and capturing all of everything that you do. Well, the government does its share of spying, but what most people don't realize, when you sign that document and you got a new job and there's this little piece of paper, usually something about a technology agreement or somewhere in there, there's a document that you've signed that basically says they can watch and monitor everything and anything that you do while you're on company time or while you're using company equipment.
So you're saying all employers or just...
The vast majority.
Okay.
Anybody that employs any number of people or does anything that's sensitive.
Do you think that owner of that furniture store was online monitoring his employees?
Monitoring himself.
Or maybe looking at their Facebook feeds, I don't know.
Could be.
Maybe he
That
was
was
just doing
probably
his
it.
government-given right.
He could have been. I mean, but I was a paying customer. And without revenue, how do you pay those employees?
Well, so, well, how do we feel about that? I mean, I don't think that's cool. Do you?
Well, I'm torn on this one. This is one where I see both sides of the argument.
Okay.
An employer has invested a lot of money. Let's say I'm, Acme Explosives Company from employing Wile E. Coyote. And, so I've invested a lot in his ability to be an employee. I pay him a fair wage. I pay his benefits. I take care of all these different things. He has proprietary customer information, sales information, product information of mine. I cannot, in a competitive environment, allow him to accidentally or purposefully release that information to either the public or a competitor, or to, in something in corporate espionage. I must control the information. So I, as an employer, have, and the courts have upheld, I have that right to keep track of everything my employees do. But we talk about, I was just in London, England, the most watched city in the world now. They have CCTV cameras everywhere. You can't get anywhere in London without the government watching you. It's really not that different with companies. If you have a corporate ID badge and you swipe to get in or out, they're tracking where you are in the building.
Fascinating.